Welcome back, welcome back. One notable feature of this election has been the outspokenness of many Hollywood stars, for one party or the other. Actually, usually in Hollywood, that means the Democrats. I met up with Danny DeVito earlier, and I asked him in passing if he thought Obama would win.
I'm very optimistic that he's going to win the election, yes.
Are you worried about people, the Bradley factor of people going into the...
I'm worried about everything. I worry about, there's always that, you want to be positive in life. You want to be right here in this moment saying this is the most important moment of my life. I do worry about little things like somebody pulling the plug. I worry about somebody tripping over a wire. I worry about somebody maliciously doing it. I don't want that to happen. I don't want somebody to say I'm going to be for Barack Obama and then have this inherent, racist thing where they go into the booth, shut the door, and say, "There's no black man going to run my country." Please, in all the goodness that we can muster up, that can't happen. I feel like it's not going to happen in the United States this year. I think we're going to go in there and we're going to tell it like it is, and we're going to make a difference in the world.
The thoughts there of Chairman DeVito, who Danny DeVito is very concerned and follows politics closely, and obviously, as you could hear from that, as a Democrat and so on. We'll be hearing more next week about the actual reason for the interview, which was to talk about his day job, namely movies. And we got into that. That seemed relevant to drop that in this week. But what he said there about American voting intentions is something that I want to take up with Andrew Kohut from the Pew Research Center. Now, what are your findings today? 4 days to go. Is Danny DeVito going to get his wish to come true?
Well, he has reason to be optimistic. I mean, the polls that I watch carefully and the poll that I do are showing a pretty sizable double-digit lead at the lowest, an 8 or 9 point lead for Barack Obama. That's a lot. Now, you can't take the American public for granted. The election is still a number of days away, and things could happen, but Obama's in pretty good shape.
And across the board, wide differences. What about Ohio? They say about Ohio that no Republican can win unless he takes Ohio.
I looked last night, and the Ohio polls have about a 5 point lead for Obama. And that's a pretty narrow lead. Ohio might go the other way. But you know what's really surprising? Many of the traditional red states, Obama's ahead. He has about an 8 point lead in Virginia. Virginia hasn't voted Democratic since 1964. North Carolina's in play for Barack Obama. The lead is narrower there. But in many places where we would have said a year ago they're red states, we'll put them in the Republican column, it's not certain.
And what about the age groups? I mean, as between 18s to 34s, and how do they divide?
It's the biggest age gap we've ever seen. Young people overwhelmingly in favor of Obama. Older people, 50 and older, especially 65 and older, white people, not so much for him. In fact, they're pretty evenly divided, leaning to McCain. And a few weeks ago, when the race was closer, we had older people strongly backing, or plurality backing, McCain.
It would take, as you said, something of a miracle to turn it around now, but you cannot call it now because there could be changes.
Well, very simply, this has been the most unpredictable, surprising election I've ever worked in. And so in a surprising election, always be prepared for another surprise. Plus, there is the issue of his race and whether the polls are undersampling people who are intolerant. The people who turn down polls also are the kinds of people who have a less positive view of African Americans. In my own view, that's a factor. It's probably a small factor. If the race was close, it would be more germane.
Well, it's getting to be too late now for an October surprise. That's usually the thing that comes up. And not many days for a November surprise. But anyway, thanks a million for being with us today.
Oh, you're quite welcome.
Well, as we've heard all throughout this programme, it's been a unique election for both parties, whether it's the record-breaking fundraising operation for the Democrats or the nomination of the first woman to run on the presidential ticket on the Republican side. Today's papers reflect the story. There it is, making their case, and then it goes on to say, on the one hand, Obama relishes challenge of a difficult time, whereas in fact John McCain, defiant McCain, seeks footing on the economy. So that's pretty believable. There's the front page there of the Wall Street Journal, which has McCain pins hopes on getting party faithful to polls in Ohio. Well, joining me now to talk more about these campaigns, what went wrong and what went right, is former economic speechwriter for President George W. Bush, David Frum, and chief political consultant on Al Gore's Democratic presidential campaign, Tad Devine. Turning to you both, what was the most important moment for each party in this election? Was there a Damascus moment? David?
Well, for the Republicans, the most important moment was something that did not happen.
It was the moment that did not happen in March after John McCain had secured the Republican nomination, where he sat down and worked with advisors to come up with a coherent economic program to deal with the slow malaise in American living standards. We had a crisis in October, and the timing of that crisis could not have been anticipated. But we've had 7 years of very slow, actually no growth in the incomes of typical Americans, and that was there for everybody to know.
And what was the most vital thing that happened to the Democrats during this campaign?
I think ironically, the most important moment for the Democrats was something that happened to the Republicans. It was the moment that John McCain walked out in public the day that Lehman Brothers collapsed and said that the fundamentals of the economy are strong. I think that when that happened, the American people saw in John McCain someone who was out of touch with the reality, the economic reality of this country.
And what about, we've mentioned, and obviously you have to in any program about the election, what about the choice of Sarah Palin? Was that a plus? Pat Buchanan thought it was a plus at the beginning and not later on. Where would you put that one, David?
Well, it doesn't do much good for it to be a plus at the beginning if it's not a plus later on, does it? That one of the criticisms that people have had about the McCain campaign is that they are so focused on the 24-hour cycle that they omitted the long game. It was just, I wrote this on the first day of she was nominated, and then again a week later, and then again through the campaign. If you put somebody who obviously can't be president right next to the oldest first-time candidate for president, the person who would be the oldest president if elected, a person with a history of health problems, it looks irresponsible. And in a year when people are very anxious, that undercuts you badly, especially since McCain's core case was that on the questions of war and national security, you can trust me more than the other person.
And there wasn't a major, as far as one could see, a major strategic error in the whole of the Obama campaign, was there?
Well, no error which the other side has been able to fully exploit. I think they've run a remarkable campaign from the beginning. First meeting the challenge of Hillary Clinton's candidacy. She was the prohibitive favorite, and they battled toe-to-toe with her, first by raising $100 million in the year before the election, as Senator Clinton did, and then by going in and out organizing her in Iowa to meet that first test. And I think when there have been stumbles along the way, whether it was the Reverend Wright in the spring, Obama interceded in such a powerful way that he was able to work his way through those problems. So I think it's been a great test, and he has met and mastered it.
I think he did make mistakes, and important mistakes. The Republicans were never able to use them. And I would disagree about the race speech. I thought that was one of the most unsuccessful major party speeches I've ever seen. Obama had a genuine problem. America encountered this man, Reverend Wright, saw his clips, heard his voice, was horrified. And instead of dealing with that in a forthright way, Barack Obama gave this long speech about his own personal autobiography, about race in America, and it was sort of a lecture. And what he was signaling to Americans is, over the next 4 years, anytime I get into trouble, you're going to get an hour-long lecture about race. What Americans really wanted to hear is, do you still believe all those crazy things that you sat there for 20 years? Tell us you don't believe them anymore.
Well, if, and we must still say if, but if in fact Senator Obama wins and John McCain therefore loses, who would be the Republican candidate at the next election?
Well, that depends on a lot. I have to ask you a lot of questions before I can answer that question. How protracted is this recession going to be? Will we hit
a year and a half.
8% or 11% unemployment? Does Obama veer to the left of his party on economics, or does he put his fate in the hands of people like Robert Rubin and Larry Summers and Paul Volcker? All of those things will have tremendous ramifications inside our party. I can give you the list of people who will be likely candidates. Sarah Palin, of course. Mitt Romney will try again. Newt Gingrich will probably try again. We may hear from some less well-known governors like Tim Pawlenty of Minnesota, and Bobby Jindal may choose this time, or he may wait till 2016, which might be more prudent. And then there will be the question of, does David Petraeus have an interest in politics, and if so, is he a Republican?
Yes, what is it? Yes, exactly. Tad, who do you think, if you win this time, you'll be facing next time?
Well, I think the Republicans are going to go through a process like we went through in the Democratic Party in the 80s. I think they're going to go back and try to rediscover what their party stands for and represents. And I think when you do something like that, it's likely that someone comes from out of nowhere, the way Obama did. I mean, 4 years ago, Barack Obama was state senator from Illinois. Now he's likely to be the president of the United States. So I think there are people out there in the Republican Party, governors, members of the House of Representatives, perhaps people who can be new television age candidates, who can exploit the internet the way Obama did. And I think it may be somebody who we don't know.
Well, thank you both very much indeed. We look forward to finding out how those predictions work out, assuming that, of course, President Obama is in office within a few weeks. We'll see what happens. We won't predict outcome definitely, even though it does look as though President Obama is a very reasonable bet. Thank you for joining us now. Until next week, goodbye for now.